Hello, I'm Hope Logan. I am an actor on Bold and the Beautiful, and many people really love both me and our Bold and the Beautiful drama. So I've come here to share updates about my beloved Bold and the Beautiful. Everyone, please subscribe and support me. If you do, I will keep coming every day with new updates for you. The storm brewing inside the halls of Forrester Creations was about to shake the very foundation of the powerful families who had built their lives around ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. Over the next 2 weeks, tensions would rise higher than ever as old wounds reopened and dangerous new rivalries threatened to explode into full-scale war. Beneath the glamorous lights of the fashion empire, emotions were already running dangerously close to the surface, and every whispered conversation carried the weight of a looming disaster. The battle lines were being drawn not only between business rivals, but between mothers and daughters, former lovers, and family members who suddenly found themselves standing on opposite sides of a conflict no one could fully control. As the pressure mounted inside the executive offices and design rooms, everyone involved could feel that something enormous was coming, something capable of changing the future of the Logan and Forrester dynasties forever. And at the center of it all stood the people who had spent years fighting for power, love, and respect, only to discover that the greatest threats were now coming from the people closest to them. During the week of May 11th through May 15th, the emotional fractures inside the Logan family would become impossible to ignore. Donna Logan Forrester would find herself desperately trying to hold her family together as the pressure surrounding Hope's future continued to intensify. Watching the growing chaos unfold around them, Donna would encourage Katie Logan Spencer to let go of the idea of poaching Hope Logan Spencer away from Forrester and instead focus on repairing the emotional damage that had already fractured the Logan family. Donna's words would come from a place of genuine fear and concern because she could already see how dangerous this growing corporate war was becoming. Every new business move threatened to drag the family even deeper into resentment and division, and she knew that once certain lines were crossed, there might be no turning back. But Katie's determination would remain strong, fueled by her belief that Hope deserved better than the uncertainty hanging over her future at Forrester. Even as Donna tried to appeal to her heart, Katie would struggle with the painful reality that protecting Hope might require making choices that could ignite even more conflict within the family itself. At the same time, Liam Spencer would once again step forward in an emotional effort to secure Hope's future, refusing to give up on the possibility of stability for the woman he still cared deeply about. Liam would make another passionate pitch in hopes of locking in Hope's role at Katie's fashion house, believing it could offer her the fresh start and security she desperately needed. Yet, despite Liam's sincerity, Hope would find herself emotionally torn between loyalty to the company that had long been tied to her dreams and the painful uncertainty of whether those dreams still had a place there. She would feel compelled to fight for Hope for the future at Forrester Creations first, unable to walk away without exhausting every last possibility. The emotional weight of that decision would hang heavily over her, because she understood that every move she made now carried enormous consequences, not only for her career, but for her family and future as well. Liam could see the conflict in her eyes, the mixture of hope and fear battling inside her, and it would become painfully clear that the road ahead was far more complicated than either of them wanted to admit. As the pressure mounted, Hope's determination would grow stronger, even while the foundation beneath her seemed increasingly unstable. Meanwhile, Brooke Logan Forrester would make a bold and irresistible move that sent shockwaves through the Forrester empire. Refusing to sit quietly while Hope's future remained uncertain, Brooke would present Ridge Forrester with a co-CEO proposal powerful enough to leave him completely reevaluating who truly belonged in charge at Forrester Creations. The moment carried enormous emotional weight because Brooke wasn't simply making a business pitch. She was fighting for her daughter, her legacy, and her own place within the company she had spent years helping build. Ridge would immediately recognize the dangerous implications of Brooke's proposal. especially when he carefully hinted the idea to Steffy Forrester Finnegan. Steffy's reaction would be instant and explosive, her fury impossible to hide, as she realized Brooke was positioning herself for power in a way that could directly threaten her leadership. Ridge would quickly understand the emotional disaster that could follow if he replaced Steffy with Brooke, because doing so would almost certainly destroy the fragile trust he still shared with his daughter. The mere possibility of such a decision would send waves of hostility crashing through the family, forcing Ridge into an impossible position where every choice risked devastating someone he loved. But even with the growing backlash, Brooke's fierce determination would leave a powerful impression on Hope, who would begin seeing a glimpse of possibility emerging from the chaos around them. Watching her mother fight so passionately for their future would ignite a renewed sense of optimism inside Hope, convincing her that perhaps they still had a chance to build something brighter if they refused to give up. Brooke's confidence and refusal to back down would create a powerful emotional momentum, inspiring Hope to believe that survival inside the cutthroat world of fashion might still be possible. Yet outside their hopeful vision, others were already beginning to worry about what Brooke's ambitions could unleash. Katie and Bill Spencer would grow increasingly uneasy as Brooke's attempted power grab gained momentum, understanding that her actions could destabilize far more than just the executive structure at Forrester. If Hope ultimately refused to join Logan, then Bill and Katie would suddenly find themselves scrambling without a major name to anchor their future plans. The uncertainty would leave them frustrated and anxious, knowing that the stakes had become much larger than anyone originally anticipated. What had started as a business opportunity was rapidly evolving into a deeply personal war, capable of reshaping every important relationship around them. Back at Forrester Creations, another storyline would quietly begin unfolding beneath the larger corporate chaos, as Melissa Dillon embraced an important new chapter in her career. Dillon appeared poised to secure an assistant position working for Daphne Rose Walton, though the possibility of a different opportunity still lingered in the air. There was also growing speculation that Electra Forrester might offer Dillon an assistant role instead, potentially opening the door for the two women to finally repair and renew their fractured friendship. Either way, emotional healing seemed possible between them, offering a rare moment of warmth and reconciliation amid the growing turmoil surrounding the company. But even this hopeful development would carry an ominous shadow lurking just beyond view. Remy Price would once again sneak into Forrester Creations, and during one tense moment, he would spot Electra and Dillon sharing an emotional hug. The sight would immediately stir emotions inside Remy, adding another dangerous layer to an already volatile situation. His growing obsession with restoring his image and reclaiming his place would continue pushing him toward increasingly reckless behavior, setting the stage for darker confrontations still to come. Elsewhere inside the company, simmering frustration would finally erupt when Zende Forrester Dominguez reached his breaking point. Furious over the fact that his Hope for the Future designs still had not made it onto the runway, Zende would unleash a fierce emotional outburst that exposed just how deeply discouraged and overlooked he truly felt. Carter Walton would attempt to calm the situation by insisting the delay was temporary, but Zende's growing doubts would refuse to disappear. Deep down, he would begin to fear that Steffy had no intention of ever giving Hope's line another real chance, no matter what promises were being made behind closed doors. The possibility would leave him bitter and frustrated, especially knowing how much passion and creative energy had already been poured into the project. Yet, in the middle of that frustration, another possibility would begin taking shape in his mind. If Brooke somehow gained control at Forrester, everything could change overnight, and Zende might find himself joining forces with Brooke and Hope in support of her becoming Ridge's co-CEO. What began as artistic disappointment was rapidly evolving into political allegiance, and the battle for control inside Forrester was becoming more dangerous with every passing day. As the story moved into the week of May 18 through May 22nd, the emotional stakes would climb even higher. Steffi's outrage would intensify dramatically if Ridge ultimately decided to force a vote regarding her co-CEO position, turning the growing family tension into a full-blown corporate showdown. For Steffy, the job represented far more than power or prestige. It was tied to her identity, her hard work, and the legacy she believed she had earned the right to protect. The mere idea that Ridge might consider replacing her with Brooke would cut deeply, reopening old insecurities and painful emotional scars that had never fully healed. Every conversation would become loaded with tension, every family interaction carrying the threat of another devastating confrontation. At the same time, Ridge himself would appear increasingly trapped between the women he loved, unable to find a path that wouldn't leave emotional destruction behind it. Whether Steffy emerged victorious or lost the position she cherished so deeply, the emotional fallout promised to leave permanent marks on everyone involved. And looming over it all was the terrifying possibility that Ridge might ultimately abandon the entire idea altogether, leaving Brooke emotionally crushed after daring to believe she still had a chance to reclaim real power. If Brooke's hopes were destroyed, the consequences could spread far beyond Forrester Creations itself. Frustrated and wounded, Brooke might decide to fully align herself with Hope at Logan instead, creating an entirely new power shift capable of changing the balance between both companies forever. Such a move would almost certainly ignite new tensions between Bill and Katie, especially if Bill began questioning whether Brooke could truly be trusted within their operation. Brooke's fierce ambition and emotional unpredictability would suddenly become a source of concern rather than strength, forcing everyone to reconsider where their loyalties truly belonged. The fragile alliances forming around Hope's future would become increasingly unstable, with every character forced to weigh personal trust against professional survival. Relationships that once seemed unbreakable would begin showing dangerous cracks, while hidden resentments threatened to rise violently to the surface. As the corporate drama spiraled deeper into chaos, it became painfully clear that nobody would escape untouched by the war unfolding around them. Meanwhile, Remy's storyline would take an even darker and more manipulative turn as his desperation continued growing. Determined to repair his damaged image and win back Deke Sharp, Remy would intensify the pressure on Dylan, pushing harder for help and refusing to accept rejection. What may have once seemed like a complicated family favor would begin transforming into something far more sinister and emotionally dangerous. Remy might even threaten to expose their cousin connection if Dylan refused to cooperate, weaponizing family secrets in a ruthless attempt to force loyalty and obedience. The emotional tension surrounding this blackmail possibility would create a chilling atmosphere, revealing just how far Remy was willing to go to regain control over his life and reputation. Dylan would suddenly find themselves trapped between fear, guilt, and loyalty, facing impossible decisions with potentially devastating consequences. As secrets tightened like a noose around everyone involved, the danger surrounding Remy's actions would become impossible to ignore. By the end of these explosive 2 weeks, the world of the bold and the beautiful would be overflowing with betrayal, emotional confrontations, desperate ambitions, and shifting alliances that threatened to change everything. The glamorous world of fashion would once again prove to be the perfect battlefield for heartbreak and power struggles, where every decision carried emotional consequences capable of destroying families and reshaping futures forever. Behind every smile and every business proposal lurked fear, resentment, and longing, creating a deeply emotional storm that refused to settle. As corporate wars intensified and personal loyalties fractured, viewers would be left wondering who would ultimately rise to power and who would lose everything they fought so hard to protect. One thing, however, was becoming painfully certain. The next chapter in this saga would not end quietly. It would erupt with shocking revelations, devastating emotional fallout, and fierce showdowns that could leave the lives of the Forresters, Logans, and Spencers changed forever. As the aftermath of the escalating chaos began to settle into an uneasy silence, it became clear that nothing inside the world of the bold and the beautiful would ever feel stable again. The battles that had been quietly building between families, lovers, and rivals were no longer contained within boardroom discussions or private conversations. They were spilling into every corner of life, poisoning trust and reshaping loyalties in real time. Inside Forrester Creations, the atmosphere grew heavier with every passing hour, as if the very walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next explosion. Ridge found himself increasingly isolated, trapped in a storm of expectations from both Steffy and Brooke, each pulling him in opposite emotional directions that threatened to tear him apart. Steffy's anger lingered like a constant warning, while Brooke's determination refused to fade, her presence still echoing through every decision Ridge attempted to make. Even the simplest choices began to feel like irreversible turning points, as if every word spoken carried the weight of an entire legacy resting on the edge of collapse. At the same time, Hope stood at a fragile crossroads, caught between loyalty to her past and uncertainty about her future, unable to fully trust where she truly belonged anymore. The emotional pressure surrounding her continued to build as she watched alliances shift and promises bend under the weight of ambition and fear. Liam's concern for her never truly faded, but even his steady presence could not fully shield her from the reality that her future was no longer in her control alone. Every direction she looked seemed to lead into deeper uncertainty, where even hope itself felt fragile and unpredictable. Meanwhile, Brooke remained unwavering, her belief in a new path growing stronger even as opposition around her hardened into resistance. The idea of change had already taken root, and now it was only a matter of time before that idea either reshaped the entire power structure or collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. And as tensions continued to rise within the corporate empire, darker forces were quietly gathering momentum in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Remy's desperation was evolving into something far more dangerous, his actions growing increasingly unpredictable as he tightened his grip on Dylan with unsettling determination. The threat of exposure hung in the air like a blade suspended just above everything he claimed to care about, turning every interaction into a silent negotiation filled with fear and implication. Dylan, torn between loyalty and survival, could feel the situation slipping further out of control with each passing moment, as what once seemed like family ties now felt like chains closing in from all sides. In this fragile balance of power, one wrong move could shatter everything: reputations, relationships, and futures that had taken years to build. And as the next wave of confrontation began to form just beyond sight, it was clear that the calm before the storm had already ended, leaving only the question of who would be the first to fall when it finally hit. As the tension deepened across every corner of this unraveling world, the sense of inevitability inside the bold and the beautiful grew impossible to ignore, as if every character was now standing on the edge of a decision that could permanently alter their fate. Inside Forrester Creations, the atmosphere no longer felt like a place of creative luxury, but rather like a battlefield where every glance carried suspicion, and every conversation hid a second meaning beneath the surface. Ridge continued to feel the pressure tightening around him, caught in a position where leadership no longer meant control, but survival. Steffi's frustration had become sharper, more direct, her patience worn thin by the growing uncertainty surrounding her authority, and the looming possibility that everything she had built could be questioned in a single vote. At the same time, Brooke's presence remained an unshakable force, her ambition no longer hidden but fully exposed, radiating through every interaction as she pushed closer to the center of power. Ridge found himself emotionally stretched between both women, each representing not just a choice in leadership, but a deeply personal collision between loyalty, history, and unresolved emotion. Hope, meanwhile, was drifting deeper into emotional uncertainty, feeling the weight of every decision pressing down on her as the future she once believed in began to fracture. The fight for hope for the future was no longer just about fashion or branding. It had become a symbol of identity, survival, and whether she still had a place in the world she had helped build. Liam's attempts to steady her heart only offered temporary comfort, as the larger reality continued to close in around her from all sides. Even moments of reassurance felt fragile, as though they could disappear the moment the next corporate decision was made. Brooke's vision, however, continued to pull Hope forward, offering a possibility that felt both hopeful and dangerous at the same time. It was a future built on risk and reinvention, one that could either elevate them into something stronger or leave them exposed to even greater destruction. Elsewhere, the tension surrounding Remy reached a more volatile edge as his manipulation of Dylan grew increasingly desperate and invasive. What had once been subtle pressure had now transformed into a constant psychological struggle, where trust no longer existed and every interaction carried the weight of threat. Dylan found herself trapped in a situation where family ties were being weaponized against her, turning something once familiar into something suffocating and unpredictable. The possibility of exposure loomed over her like a shadow she could not escape, forcing her into a corner where every choice felt like a loss.